All right, the Pelicans season is on the brink right now, and I'm going to explain to you why it feels like New Orleans is lost and why it raises big questions for this offseason. It's a live post-game 3 edition of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, here with y'all in a live post-game episode, Game 3, 106. Oh, this number hurts to say out loud. 85 points for New Orleans in this. They are down now 0-3 in their first round NBA playoff series in the Western Conference with the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let's try and make sense of why the Pelicans are in this position. And I'm gonna give you a little more transparency here. We're gonna workshop in this live episode, I see y'all audience, of a couple episodes we're gonna do in the off season, because everything you're seeing with the Pelicans right now and where they are in the postseason is the seeds were laid for that, the foundation were laid for that, early on in the year and in this past off season. When you kind of look at the trajectory of their season, this shouldn't necessarily be some of a surprise. And I'm going to probably tell you a couple things you didn't know in today's live episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, become an everydayer. That means you listen to Locked On Pelicans Monday through Friday. We are the #1 Pelicans podcast. No one else comes to y'all like this. We're going to give you some things in this show that you haven't really heard anywhere else. We're going to talk about that blowout loss. That was a rough loss at home in Game 3 for the New Orleans Pelicans. So let's kind of get into it here. And I want to start with this. The offense, struggling yet again. The Pelicans haven't eclipsed 92 points in any game this series. The fact that they were held to 85 total points is awful. Look, Zion's out. The Oklahoma City Thunder are clearly a better team than New Orleans is, maybe even with Zion Williamson. You shouldn't look this bad. The offense shouldn't look this bad, but it does. In a game with no Zion, you took just 32 threes. You were 9 of 32 from there. You shot 38.1% from the field. You had 20 turnovers. This is frankly garbage. One of the things, if you're an everydayer of Locked On Pelicans, that I've kind of preached on here is how interconnected offense and defense are. They're really linked in a way that I don't think most people realize, and it's probably, in my opinion, closer to soccer than it is in, say, football, where offense and defense are really separate. In soccer, they're kind of one and the same, and I really believe that about the NBA and offenses in basketball, right? One of the things you saw in this game was the Pelicans just taking bad shots. Just bad shots, horrible shot selection by New Orleans in this game. And when they miss those shots, because that's what you do with bad offensive shot selection, it leads to really easy offense for the Oklahoma City Thunder. And the stats don't really do it justice. OKC had 21 points in the fast break compared to just 16 for New Orleans. I promise you, if we were counting semi-transition opportunities, that number would be higher. And there was a stretch when New Orleans got this game within 10 points. And then it ballooned immediately to 19. The Thunder also had a 14-0 run in the first half. And a lot of that was just bad shot selection, long mid-range jumpers by the Pelicans, leading to semi-transition opportunities for the Thunder. And they just took wide open three-pointers. And then they made them because those are practice looks. And anytime New Orleans made this one kind of close, OKC went on a small run because New Orleans just gave it to them. The past 2 episodes of Locked On Pelicans, if you're an everydayer and you were watching the show and you listened to the show, one of the things I had said was you've got to take smart shots because you're playing right into the hands of this OKC defense. New Orleans continued to do that in this game. That is both on the players and the coaches. I've heard from both sides on this, and I'm here to tell you right now, if you're looking for who to blame for this 0-3 deficit, it's the players, it's also the coaches. It's literally everybody. No one gets a pass on this. Brandon Ingram is taking some bad shots. He's taken bad shots all year long. In this game, he actually took more threes than he normally does, one of which was a heave at the end of the third quarter, first half, whatever it was. He was 2 of 3 from deep. Take more threes. We've been screaming this all season long. Go to the rim more. He took his second shot at the rim in the fourth quarter of this game. They don't need to drop more plays for him to do this stuff. He just simply needs to do it. And in fact, here's one of the things that I'm going to tell you that you haven't really heard anywhere else, right? And this is going to be a whole show this offseason, probably multiple shows. They designed a new offense at the beginning part of this year, and they abandoned it about a month or two into the season because Brandon Ingram wouldn't take threes and wouldn't get to the rim and likes that mid-range jumper. He loves that shot. It's a fine shot at times. Now, that long mid-range jumper that he likes teams make at a 41.8% rate, that's not a good number. That's on literally the whole league average. But they kind of abandoned that offense because Brandon Ingram wouldn't play within it. And you saw it in this game. You've seen it in the whole postseason. He took 2 shots at the rim and 3 shots from 3, including 1 heave. So let's remove that. 2 shots from 3, 1 shot at the rim. Everything was a mid-range jumper. Yeah, you could say that's cash money for him. That's his shot, but that doesn't fall at a high enough rate to justify this. And when you miss that shot, the opponent gets out and runs and gets semi-transition or full transition opportunities. It's bad offense leading to even worse defense. If you're an everydayer, how often have I said something like that on this show? Your defense then can't get back and get set when you're missing shots like that. It's better shot selection. The Pelicans have tried to get some of these players to shoot better shots. They refuse. And you're seeing it rear its ugly head in a bad position in the postseason. This is why everyone's to blame for this. The players and the coaches and the front office for not making obvious moves that you should have made. This is a failure at all 3 levels when it comes to this. And it's disappointing that it's rearing its ugly head here, but the foundations for all of this were laid early on in the season. So this has been a huge disappointment, but it starts on the offensive end. Everything starts on the offensive end, which is what we've been saying all season long for New Orleans in this one, right? BI wasn't good. 19 points on 14 shot attempts while only taking 3 threes is bad. 1 assist. That's not good enough here. CJ McCollum, it was worse. 16 points on 22 shot attempts in 34 and a half minutes of action. We'll get into changes they need to make that they don't have a choice to make at this point. And that's coming up in another segment here. He started 1 of 9, 1 of 10, 1 of 10. Why are you playing him 35 minutes? Why are you playing him 35 minutes at that point in time, right? The bench, not giving you anything. Jose Alvarado goes 0 for 4 in 10 and a half minutes. Play Dyson Daniels at that point. There's so many just little things here that the Pelicans aren't doing that it makes you go, WTF? What the, right? That's the graphic here. This was just so disappointing that the Pelicans have not learned, it feels like anything that they needed to have learned throughout the season, the players and the coaches included. Now, let's get into some of the changes they have to make. But here's the thing. You're going to be disappointed by this next segment. Again, I'm workshopping stuff for the offseason right now. Everything we just talked about in this segment, the lack of the players wanting to buy into the offense and doing what they need to do is going to be multiple shows. Now, here's the other thing. They're not going to get rid of some of these guys. They need to make some changes. They're not going to. We'll explain that. And why actually I thought the defense on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was really good. And that's coming up here next in a bonus live episode of Locked On Pelicans. Look, let it all out in the comments. This is a safe space. Let me know how you feel in the comments down below. Let's talk more about the defense, which I thought was, at times at least on Shai, good. But some of the changes they got to look at because they need to help themselves, and they are not doing that. That's coming up here next in a bonus live episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about Monopoly Go. Look, we've all been there. It was probably during this game. Either as a player or a fan, it's halftime. The scoreboard is not looking good. You're feeling low. You're not sure your team can pull out a win. And that's when you dig deep, lift your head up and say to yourself, it's time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists and take as much of my friends' money as I possibly can. That's right. The smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but on your phone, anytime, anywhere, with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. And there's so much to do. Play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards, including, by the way, the one I'm on, the New Orleans board. I finally made it. Make your friends bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball and charge other players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to crack open community chests in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb the leaderboards. So get back out there, put on your game face, and download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store and Google Play. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is also brought to you by Game Time. This is my go-to ticketing app, by the way. You know, buying tickets can be frustrating. Are the seats going to be good if you're going to a place you've never been? Are you getting the best deal? Do you buy now? Do you buy later? All of those things lead to a lot of uncertainty, but Game Time takes the uncertainty out of buying tickets. Last minute deals. You wanted to go to the game on Saturday last minute, you probably could have saved up to 60% off by buying last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. You don't need to have a plan. If you're a spontaneous person, Game Time is perfect for figuring out what you want to do on the weekends. But you also have the lowest price guarantee. So if you bought tickets early, you're totally covered. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference if tickets in the same section and row are listed for less. You can buy anytime and you know you're going to get the best price. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, the good, the bad. Right now, it's a whole lot of bad as the Pelicans season is on the brink. But don't forget, the The NFL draft was going on this past couple of days. Ross Jackson, host of Locked On Saints. Saints take it a QB. Was Spencer Rattler the right choice? Ross Jackson's going to break down everything black and gold on Locked On Saints. Go give it a listen if you don't already to make sense of the Saints draft. He's going to be covering it all. Right after I record this, I'm throwing it on because I want to hear about Spencer Rattler because I don't love Derek Carr. But right now we are talking about the Pelicans. Oh man, this number is rough to say. 106-85. 85 points. Your points in this series have been 92, 92, 85. You couldn't crack 90 points. Because the offense this team has tried to run wasn't done by the players and just no one has adapted from it. And they didn't make changes that were going to change anything. I've preached and talked about offense all year long. The offense is garbage. There's no other way to put it. The offense is garbage right now for New Orleans. And you're not going to win unless you're scoring points. And your defense can't do the things the defense likes to do unless they're back and set. And even then it was going to be a challenge against OKC, which has a top offense because you win by forcing turnovers. And the Thunder don't let you do that. But you can't force turnovers in transition, which is where the Thunder were playing a ton in this game. This leads to some big questions. How much can you rely on Brandon Ingram? How much can you rely on Brandon Ingram? This was his series. No Zion. Take over, right? He has failed. Failed. There's no question about that. The mid-rangers, all of his shot, it's not falling because that's not a good shot. This is why we've railed against this all season long. Take more threes. Get to the rim. 2 shot attempts at the rim. Basically 2 shot attempts from 3. Out of how many did he take in this game? Brandon Ingram took 14 shot attempts. 10 of them were mid-range shots. How'd that go? 50% from the field? Cool. 19 points on 14 shot attempts, minus 12. Got to the line just 3 times. You're not going to win games when that's the case. You're not going to win games unless you're taking good shots, and he's not. The Thunder are thrilled to let him take those mid-rangers because he catches it and then just shoots it or just dribbles and shoots it. There's no ball movement, and that's when the Pelicans are at their best. getting teams rotating, moving the ball around until you find an open shot. You can't do it. The Pelicans only took 32 threes in this game. And look, well, if you're down, take more threes. It's really as simple as that, right? No, it's not. You actually have to manufacture good looks. There's some work that goes into that, and it involves ball movements. They can play Brandon Ingram one-on-one because they know that worst case or best case, he's going to take a terrible shot. And if he does that, you don't need to throw two guys at him, which means no one's open. So you can't even pass the ball to them for a wide open shot. So how far can you go with Brandon Ingram? It's a valid question to ask right now. There's nothing the staff can do to make him take more threes. He just won't do it. That's why they abandoned their offense early on in the year, that James Borrego offense that they brought him in for. We're going to have a whole couple of, we're probably going to do a week on that when the season ends, which is looking like next week right now, right? There's a reason they didn't do Point Zion to start the year and then eventually went back to that. And I'll explain all of that at some point this offseason. So subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, because we are Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're going to give you insight into this team that you can't get anywhere else. CJ is just missing. And if CJ McCollum is going to go 7 for 22, 31.8%, 2 of 8 from 3, 25%, 7 assists, that number's nice. But 6 turnovers, 16 points on 22 shot attempts, shouldn't be in the league. CJ's better than that. We all know that. This is just a bad series for him. He was playing great basketball to end the season. So this is a bit of a surprise. But you shouldn't play him almost 35 minutes if this is the case, right? This is where you need to play guys like Jordan Hawkins and others. But here's the thing. You've squandered that opportunity with Hawkins a little bit. Would have been great if Hawkins was getting minutes all year, developing, being ready to go. I don't know if you should actually play him, because I don't think Hawkins is going to play better than CJ necessarily. But you know what ain't it? CJ right now. I don't think you can get much worse. And if it does, who cares? You just lost by 20 plus at home, 21 points at home. You lose by 30. Who cares? Play the other guys that maybe give you a chance and the guys that aren't. And that's a coaching issue. Should have been playing Hawkins at times this season, some of the blowouts and other things when you could have gotten him minutes, so that if you needed to rely on him, break glass in case of emergency, you could have done that. You can't now. And that was a mismanaged season. That's on the coaching staff with this sort of thing, right? Here's the thing with CJ. He's getting lit up defensively. I don't have the matchup data for this game yet. It'll come out probably tomorrow, but it wasn't good. All series long, they've been hunting CJ McCollum. And so here's the thing. If he was scoring 30 plus per game, all right, you can live with the defensive issues. You're not getting anything out of him. Bad defense, bad offense. So if you put in Hawkins and he gives you bad defense, bad offense, who cares? What's the difference? But you're not seeing the team do that, partially because of the way they didn't develop Hawkins this season. And that's insanely disappointing to see. That is a mistake that they made. It's hindsight, but we also could have kind of seen this a little bit during the regular season too. Now, you might say, because a couple people did on Twitter to me when I said maybe play Hawkins over CJ McCollum. Well, he's going to get picked on defense too. Totally. He absolutely will. They will hunt him and he will probably give up points. But CJ's already given up points and isn't giving you the offense. If he just goes, here's this. If Hawkins goes 16 points on 16 shot attempts, that's better than what CJ gave you, which was 16 points on 22 shot attempts. You may as well try that. It's not like it could get a whole lot worse here for everything. And that is a huge problem for New Orleans in this series. They just look woefully unprepared. And it's so disappointing. Seeing the play from Brandon Ingram is so disappointing. Seeing the play from CJ here is so disappointing. Not having anything here for adjustments from the coaching staff is so disappointing. And it's all, the center position has been an issue. JV hasn't really been playable this series. Neither is Larry Nance Jr. They could have addressed it at the trade deadline. They decided not to, right? Even making a move. Daniel Gafford would look amazing on this team. And I was a guy who was like, no, don't do that. oh boy, was I wrong on all of that. It's just every mistake they made during the regular season from the players and the coaches is rearing its ugly head in this postseason series. And it's why they're down 0-3 and why these past 2 games haven't been close. Do you feel confident going into game 4? There is a bright spot. There is a bright spot, and we'll talk about that in the next segment, that I thought they did a good job on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. And that's what you need. But here's the thing, like, you've got to win some of these minutes, and they just really haven't. And maybe this is a bad matchup. We'll probably dive into that. I see someone in the comments here being like, Jake, so what's your solution? There might not be a solution, is what I'm saying. You know, you need to be prepared for the postseason and do things during the regular season that are going to get you there, and this team did not do them. Let's talk more about that. I like that as the next segment here. We're gonna go a bit off script. That's coming up here next in today's episode, a live post-game episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about Prize Picks because Prize Picks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You pick more or less on 2 or more players' stats, and then you watch the winnings roll in. And now you can win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. They also offer quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, and an enormous selection of players and stat types. And that's what makes Prize Picks the #1 fantasy sports app. So download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, download the app. That's a free $100 up to $100 when you use promo code LOCKEDONNBA. Prize Picks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team here. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join almost 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube. We are live right now, post Game 3, racing home to get live for y'all on YouTube here. 106-85. The Thunder beat the Pelicans to go up 3-0, and it's just a failure all around. On the players, on the coaches. Feel how you want about this game, this series. Like, it's okay. You hate Willie Green, that's fine. You hate the players, that's okay too. I'm not sparing anybody right now. Everybody is at fault. The front office is at fault too. Everybody is at fault. I'm not going to go full on Giannis and be like, we need to wash the uniforms better. No, those people are fine. The game day crew is fine and all of that, the game day experience. It's truly on the 3 important parts of this for the organization: the front office, the coaching, the players. They have failed you this season as fans. They did not make the changes they needed to make, right? You know, and here's the thing. I meant to tease this in the last segment, and I forgot to, right? You know, there are some big questions, right? I see a lot of people in the comments here being like, it's time for changes. It's a small market. It's hard to do that. Here's what I expect. This is a teaser. Again, we're workshopping shows that are going to be in this offseason. They're going to extend Brandon Ingram. You want BI gone? They're not. They're going to extend him, would be my bet. Or at least talk about it with him. But I think they're going to try and extend him and then figure it out later. You know, CJ's not going to be shipped out just yet. The way I've described it on this to you, Sharif Ishak, who's a good friend of mine who I watched the game with today and watched game 1 with as well. He came over to my place. You know, you say something's wrong with you. Physically, you're ill. Something's not right. You don't just necessarily rush into surgery. You might, but you try and figure out other solutions first. Maybe it's rest. Maybe it's whatever before you have surgery here. You know, Pelicans are going to do the same thing. They're going to try and get a new starting center and see if that unlocks them, right? You start there. Like, how do you triage this in levels? First thing you do, new starting center. Second, maybe you need, I don't think they need a pure point. I think they need another combo guard who's capable of tacking and generating some offense. Passing and scoring, I think, is balanced in what they need as opposed to a pure point. Again, that's going to be a whole show this offseason. Get someone like that in. Then maybe after then you probably fire the coach after that, right? New center, new point guard, new coach. Then you finally get to maybe moving on from Brandon Ingram and Zion Williamson and figure that out. But my guess would be they're going to extend Brandon Ingram. They're going to keep CJ McCollum, and the big change is going to be a different center. But there's tactical issues that they are running into, and they are playing right into the hands of the Oklahoma City Thunder. And here's the thing. They made some good tactical changes in this game. They actually did make some very good tactical changes in this game defensively, and they really limited Shai Gilgeous-Alexander in a way that they hadn't in this series. You might look at his points and go 24 on 20 shot attempts. That's not great efficiency for him. That's far worse than how he normally plays during the regular season. One of my keys in this one, if I were to have given you keys and I don't do that, is you've got to defend him better, right? They made an adjustment in game 2 that was to not switch everything, instead fight through screens, and it led to OKC just ripping wide open three-pointers. I actually don't hate that, right? I'd rather make guys like Josh Giddey and others beat you. Josh Giddey scored 21 points. He was 4 of 7. I'm fine with that if that means you limit Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and guys like Jalen Williams, and for the most part, they kind of did in this game. They did a good job with that. The problem was their offense was utter crap. Their offense was so bad that it didn't matter if you limited Shai Gilgeous-Alexander if you can't score on the other end, right? God, that hurt. If your offense is just playing in mud the whole game, and this one felt like it was, what you do defensively doesn't matter, right? Cool. You held the Thunder to 90 points. That's a tremendous defensive game. You still lost. We said this after game 1, game 2, right? Hold them under 100, you still lose. Hold them to 95 in any game this series, you still lose. Hold them to 93 in every game this series, you still lose, right? You can't win games unless you have a good offense. You're also not going to get stops unless you have a good offense because of the way the Pelicans defense is built. We've talked about this all year long here on Locked On Pelicans if you're an everydayer, and I'm just repeating myself at this point. Good defense is going to lead to easier offense. We know that. But good offense is also going to lead to easier defense. And then guess what that does? That means your easier good defense leads to better offense. These things build off of one another. And this team struggles with that. This team struggles with that. That's on coaching. That's on just the overall philosophy with everything. And it's a big reason why this team is down 0-3. They've not learned their lessons this season. Everything we are seeing in this series is very predictable. The bad shot selection by Brandon Ingram was predictable. The center position being in an issue was predictable, right? All of that was not something that we could have, were shocked by, right? Think of the children. No, we saw this coming, and they didn't do anything about it. And so when we look at this, I know people want to blame refs. I saw a lot of people tweeting at me about the refs. Refs don't matter at this point. Refs don't matter in this series at all. At all. It's this team. And they have no one but themselves to blame for the position that they're in right now. So we're going to look at the coaching and all of that maybe in tomorrow's show. You know, I don't want to get ahead of myself of should they fire Willie Green or not. And I don't think they will. I don't necessarily think they should. There's arguments that are very valid to be made from moving on from the head coach here. You know, that is what you got to look at here with everything here. And it's very, very disappointing. I'm looking at some of the comments and I was like trying to understand here with everything, but look, let it out. We're not going to do a bonus segment here. It's a Saturday. Y'all want to go and do your thing here, but the Pelicans just didn't basically just sum it up is they didn't learn their lessons this season. They didn't learn their lessons at all and adapt and kind of understand their own challenges and everything, and now are just playing right into everything OKC does. And it's very disappointing to see. And we'll see what happens on Monday. Hopefully the Pelicans can extend this series, but they've got to make some big changes. Let's end on that part here. They've got to make some big changes. Like you should probably, if CJ McCollum is having a terrible game, don't play him 35 minutes. Play Jordan Hawkins. Like what have you got to lose? It can't get worse, right? They probably need to play more Dyson Daniels versus Jose Alvarado in this series as well. And then honestly, like if Brandon Ingram doesn't shoot threes, take him out of the game. Take him out of the game. What are you going to do? Lose by 20? Cool. That would have been losing by 20 in this game would have been better because they lost by 21. This is one that I don't want to like scream organizational failure because you're in the postseason. You won 49 games. Like it's not an organizational failure. It's a postseason failure. It's a failure to plan for the postseason and to be forward thinking. Not an organizational failure. Like I'm not going to be like poverty franchise or all of that, but it's disappointing nonetheless. And fans deserve better than what we saw on the court in the Smoothie King Center, even with half off concessions to start the game. It's got to be better than that. And see what game 4 holds. You know, right now, to be perfectly honest with y'all, I'm not actually optimistic. If you know me, if you're an everyday of the show, you know that I'm pretty optimistic about them, and I always look for the good in the team. Right? Coming in and just being like, this team sucks, there's no reason to turn in my show the next day if that's the case. Right? Like, I want y'all here. So we look for positives and building for the future and things that are interesting with all of that. There's a lot with that still, but man, this game was rough to watch in person. And if they don't make some big changes for game 4, they're going to lose. They're going to get swept. That's going to be very, very embarrassing. And will that actually spur changes in the offseason? That's the big question. We're going to cover it all here on Locked On Pelicans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison. We think we've had a show every single day this month, so please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Tell a friend about the show as well. Enjoy your Saturdays. Enjoy Jazz Fest on Sunday. I will see y'all out there. It's going to be a lot of fun. Back in the Smoothie King Center on Monday. We'll have another show for you then. We might have 2 shows for you then because we're doing it all here, the #1 Pelicans podcast. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all next time.